Well, hello again. We're talking about The Evil Next Door on Gene and Roger Talk Movies. I'm Roger.
I guess that makes me
And
Gene.
that does make you Gene.
Yar.
And well, we got to start somewhere, so we'll start there. Evil Next Door. It's a movie currently playing on Hulu and other streaming platforms, so pretty easily accessible.
Easily.
And
Yar.
came out in June 25th, 2021. Unique in that it's directed by two people. They are Swedish people, so forgive me if I butcher their name, but
Swedish movie.
Tord Danielson and Oscar Melander. And so you don't usually see two directors on a movie, so I would love to hear the backstory on that if I ever ran across such a thing of how that worked. But it's a Swedish film, as we said, so it is subtitled. And of course, those of us in deep into horror, we're okay with subtitles because we know the works of like Jean Rollin and Jess Franco, and we go into the Italian movies and Spanish films and all that. So, when you're talking about subtitled movies, I'm just going to go off on a little aside here.
Go off.
I do always want to watch the film in its original language because it allows you to get a better feel for the actors and really what the scene is about and the voice inflections and things like that. And when you see a dubbed movie, sometimes you lose, well, most of the time you lose that. The only dubbed movies I'm okay with are the old Godzilla movies because the dialogue doesn't really matter in those. But anyway, Gene, initial thoughts on Evil Next Door.
Well, hey, I'm going to reinforce a little bit about what you said about the movies in the original language. I think that's important. You catch those inflections, and then when it's translated or dubbed into English, sometimes the action and the sound doesn't match, and I think this is one that you should leave the subtitles on and watch it in the original Swedish, because it just enhances the movie. Because I actually tried to watch it, in the English, and it just wasn't right because you knew that it wasn't their real voices. You just knew, and so it's better to watch in the original. Yeah, but the movie. It's funny because I think lots of times in this day and era, we for movies before we watch them, we oftentimes look at Rotten Tomatoes or we look at other scoring metrics, and this movie has a horrible Rotten Tomatoes score. They just ripped it. But sometimes you just need to ignore that. Because this movie is not bad, it's actually pretty good. Mm-hmm. Evil Next Door, it's had a 33% Rotten Tomatoes score, and conversely, I've seen some movies that had really high Rotten Tomatoes scores, let's watch this, and I just completely unwatchable movies because they're just so bad. So I think the point is that if a movie seems interesting to you, sometimes you just need to push that aside and just watch the thing, because sometimes, those movie review, you give them a little too much credit, and plus, who are these people? Who is Rotten Tomatoes? Who are they?
Well, and Gene, remember, we're also kind of reviewing movies as well. So it's like, who are we? Well, it's Gene and Roger.
Yeah, we're Gene and Roger, but I think we get into a little more depth than some of those guys because I've read some of those reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It's like, what? It's like, are you in fifth grade? It's like, shut up.
Well, and I'm wondering too about the lower Rotten Tomato score. I'm wondering, is that because, if you are a hardcore horror fan, if you go in expecting this to be some sort of hardcore horror film, wall-to-wall gore, something like that, I could see you being disappointed, right? Because that's not what this film is. It's much more subtle and things like that. But yeah, it's way better than the Rotten Tomato scores would lead you to believe.
And other people was like, oh, it's a ripoff on The Conjuring and blah, blah, blah. It's like, come on, let's move beyond that.
Yeah, how many movies did The Conjuring rip off? How many haunted house movies are out there, right?
What is it? Something like there's only 7 thematic elements in all movies anyway. But so we're all watching the same idea over and over again. But hey, so the movie's great. Please, watch it. Yeah, I think it's available on Hulu. But I was watching this. I had to in writing my notes here, is like I was talking it over with my wife, and because of some of the original impressions on this movie is that it brings up like the concept of family and the family dynamics, because there's three people here. There's the husband is Frederick, the kid Lucas,
Yep.
6-year-old about.
Well, he's almost 6.
Yeah.
That's a point that's made later in the film.
Yeah, like a late 6-year-old boy. Yeah, and then there's a woman, Sharon, and she's newly married to Frederick, and Frederick had been married before, but the previous wife had passed away. Looks like to cancer, and then so Sharon is the new wife, and so Lucas's stepmom. And so she's clearly really uncomfortable in that role. It looks like that the previous mother was very close to the family. They had like a special song they would always sing together. And so Sharon seems like super uncomfortable with her newfound role as a mother. And she doesn't sing the family song. I guess she wants to maybe leave that as a precious relic, for them to remember the other mother, the real mother. And so, but yeah, it's that uncomfortableness with her newfound role as a mother.
Well,
I think really handicaps her.
Yeah, and I also like how I also like that part. It's real kind of subtle throughout the film, but I also liked early on in the film, Lucas, the young boy, is also struggling with this new person in his world, right? 'Cause
Right.
remember in the car sequence right at the beginning, he basically questions her and says, "Well, are you also going to die?" Right? And so
Yeah, he does.
He's also kind of struggling with that loss of his mother still, and the fear that this may happen again.
Yeah. He says, "Are you going to die too?" Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I actually wrote it down. Yeah. So they're both struggling, and so yeah, it made me wonder. Is like, is that I wondered like for Frederick, did he pursue Sharon, and did he get married too soon after the death of his wife? Because Sharon, she's almost seems like an outsider in this triad here, and it's kind of made me wonder about families. Do families really? It seems like all three of them never had really sat down and really talked about, what's going on and Sharon's newfound role in the family, and in a way that Frederick and Lucas had not really, it seemed, accepted her as a family. So yeah, it just brought up a lot of points with the family dynamics and openness within families. And do families oftentimes, do they kind of just go through the motions of life and go through the daily routines? And oftentimes our lives are so busy, but sometimes I think we can let our busyness kind of like dominate us, and then we don't spend time talking about the real things going in our lives and what's happening with our close relationships, or relationships that should be close, but they're not as close as they need to be because we are too busy. We make ourselves busy.
Well, and basically the premise here is they are moving into a brand new house.
Right.
And it's a duplex. And this movie, I immediately noticed how well it is shot. I think they're shooting in a 2:35:1 ratio, so the shots are extremely wide. Most horror films don't usually do that. They're usually filming in a more claustrophobic ratio, 185:1, 133:1, to really bring you kind of more claustrophobic feel, especially haunted house movies. This one's wide. It's 2:35:1 at least, maybe even 2:40:1. And that comes into play really effectively later in the film as you're going down hallways and things, because it really heightens the depth of the hallway and the claustrophobic feel of the hallway because you can see so much of the wide screen. But anyway, that's just me getting off on my weird aspect ratio.
No. For sure. Is that I noticed this is that the movie keeps going back to repeated images and repeated sounds. So this movie's big on images and sounds. Of course, all movies are, right? But they consciously, you can tell it's a directorial choice to repeat certain images, long hallways, long dark hallways, faces shown in shadows, and the same sounds keep coming back over and over again. So yeah, definitely.
Well, and I will point out more about the sound. another certainly conscious decision by the directors here is there is sound all the time. But what they do is they have this low, very low sound. And I even used my headphones just to try to get a better handle on what they're doing there. But they've kind of got this subtle underlay of noise really low on this soundtrack, which is really kind of a subliminal kind of attempt to heighten the tension of this film. And I really, really loved that. Other movies like The Exorcist have done similar things. But it really, because as I was watching it, I was like, why am I kind of unnerved like all the time in this film when the scares start happening? And then I was realizing, oh, wait, there's this other soundtrack going on underneath this film here. And it's always happening. So if you really pay attention to that, it'll just be a scene where, oh, maybe Shirin is just making a cup of coffee. You hear the coffee and all that, but then underneath all that sound, there's this other noise going on, this other kind of music cue going on under there, but it's real deep in the soundtrack. So really interesting. But we're kind of geeking out right now on aspect ratios and sound. But
no, that little stuff like that makes movies better.
Yeah, and I think it just highlights that these guys knew what they were doing and what they wanted to accomplish with this film. And the reason I was going off on the aspect ratio, though, is they move into this duplex, but they have this establishing shot of the duplex where one side is really, really nice. One half of this duplex, it's painted, the yard's well kept, it's really nice. And then the unit right next door to it, the other half of this duplex, is decayed, rotting. And so it kind of played off. I was watching it again last night, I was like, oh yeah, Gene, when in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Gene was talking about the dark world and the light world, and wow, here's a complete visual representation of that, you know?
Yeah, it just made me wonder, is like buying a duplex is like would I have bought that? In a way, I probably would have I would have bought the whole thing, and then I would have refurbished the other side, because clearly the other side was in need of some major fixing.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you just have to just clean it and just paint the thing. But yeah, there was major repair.
Well, and I was thinking, they're a brand new couple, and I'm like going, well, maybe they got a good deal on this, which is why they just went for it. I mean, the unit they move into was beautiful.
It was beautiful. It had been, the realtor had said it had been newly refurbished.
Yeah. And so I was just wondering, well, maybe they're just kind of tight on their budget, and so, hey, this is the best place we've seen, and we'll just go for it. So but of course, welcome to horror movies, right away stuff starts to kind of happen.
Right away.
Frederick, the dad, the husband, he ends up having to get called away. Of course, you always got to get called away, right, for work, away. And
he had some kind of high-level construction job.
And so it ends up with just Shirin and Lucas in the house, and then and actually, when they are touring the house before they buy it, there is a great scene there where Lucas first encounters whatever it is that is inhabiting this duplex.
It seems like as soon as Lucas, remember Lucas is the kid, as soon as he walks into the house, he shrugs, and it seems like he feels something right away.
Yeah.
The moment he enters the house.
And then he walks upstairs to what ultimately becomes his bedroom, and he walks in, and there's some space kind of wallpaper on there, and so it's clearly probably where a kid has been before. And then the dad comes up, and Lucas says, "A child lives here."
Right.
And the dad didn't catch that. The dad was like, well, yeah, I'm sure this was the kid's room. But not catching the fact that, nope, Lucas is saying there's a child living here right now.
Yeah, he said a child lives here in present tense, because Lucas walks into the house, and then, the parents are downstairs exploring, chatting. And so he goes upstairs to look at the other rooms. And then out of that room, he hears laughing, a child's laugh. Yeah. And so he checks it out. Of course, it's empty. But this is happening the very first moment that they go into the house.
Yeah.
So, I really like that, because this movie is, we've seen this before in movies where the wife and the kids, they mention the obvious things of what's going on, but they're completely ignored. So here's the first clue. Yeah.
Well, and as the movie goes along, the ignoring of the kid and his experience is kind of heightened between the dynamic with the dad and the young boy. But we'll get into that a little bit later. And of course, this movie just plays out with your, I'm going to call it your standard horror movie tropes. I just think it's done at a very high level. There's a great sequence where Shirin is just kind of hearing Lucas speaking, and then she kind of looks up the stairwell, and he's got his head up against the wall like he's listening to somebody in the other clearly vacant and empty and long
Right, there's
empty
something
area.
on the other side of the
Yeah.
wall, right.
And so it's really setting this tone of slowly building this tension here with this, whatever this element is in the other apartment or the other duplex side.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and things happen pretty fast. Like they actually, they give dates. So I guess on 9/26/14, they move in. Yeah, and right away, like we said, Lucas here's laughing, you know, the very first moment. But yeah, that tapping happens, you know, within the first few days. Yeah.
Yep, and there's tapping, there's noise, laughter. Shirin does discover Lucas at one point playing hide and seek.
Yeah. But remember, I think there's a part where or Lucas was playing outside.
Oh, right.
Yeah. We can't pass by. That's
Yeah,
like the
we
first.
can't.
That's like the first, I think, real encounter. Like, because Lucas is outside playing with this little construction.
Well,
toy,
and first of all, what a cool construction toy that
it's a pretty cool
was.
one. Yeah. And so, but then there's a hedge, right? And so there's a hole in the hedge. Of course, it has got to be a hole. And all of a sudden, the ball is kicked from the other side of the hedge to Lucas. You know, so Lucas is like looking around, where'd this ball come from? And of course, it came from the hole in the hedge. And so he pushes it back. He's all curious, and the ball comes back again. You know, yeah. And so he's like really intrigued. And so something's happening. And he goes, of course, you know, he's a kid, so he goes through the hole in the hedge to the other yard, and he's looking at the entrance to one of the windows into the other house. And what does he see? He sees another boy. He says it's a real dark. You never see this boy until later, like in fully illuminated. But there's clearly a small boy in the upstairs room, you know, and you can see him.
Right,
Yeah,
and I really do like, again, how the directors played that scene and then other scenes like it, where you are really struggling to see because the camera frame is so wide. You're always looking back and forth in this screen to see, okay, where's the thing I'm supposed to see, and they kind of do a tone down of the light where then that illuminates this figure up in the window, and there's multiple scenes throughout this film where that kind of situation happens, and so again, heightening the tension for the viewer because you don't really know where this entity might be or what we're supposed to be seeing in these shadows, and then suddenly it appears, and it's a really cool scene there.
Yeah, it's just like we as the viewer, we're going through a discovery and alongside with the people in the movie because they are trying to discover what's going on, and so we're along with them.
Well, and then Shirin, of course, discovers the boarded up entrance to the attic.
Right, exactly.
And of course, you know, anytime in a horror movie you see something boarded up, rule number one should be, don't unboard that. But
well, they just moved in, and so clearly what happened is the previous owner had boarded that up, and we kind of skipped over that because the movie actually starts with there was the previous tenant in that house. And that previous tenant had a daughter named Kim. And actually the movie starts there with a brief sequence of Kim being abducted by something, and the other mom trying to follow and trying to pursue and save her daughter Kim. But somehow something was maybe her own fears or her own... Yeah, probably her own fears actually kept her from pursuing and saving her daughter. So Kim is disappeared. So it's a little bit there. So I think that previous tenant had boarded that up.
Right.
So of course you're a new tenant, and it's unsightly, and so you take the boards off, and and then the stairs they fall down rather loudly, you know, and then you go up and check it out. And this is one part of the movie that I think was completely false, because if you have a side by side duplex and you share in the same attic, the attic there's going to be a divider in that attic. You know, you can't just go up into the attic on your side and then crawl over, and then you're over the attic in the other unit. You know, so there would have been a divider, but she goes up and the attic is completely open and they're boards. So actually you can physically walk, or, you know, on your fours, you know, on your hands and knees, you can go and then to the similar entrance in the other unit. And then it's actually, so then if you could push that down, you would be in the other unit. So that's false. Houses aren't designed that way, but
but
it had something in this movie.
Gene, we're in Sweden here, so maybe the Swedes.
Yeah, maybe the Swedes. They just are trusting of each other. We're Americans, yeah.
Right, but I do actually like when the stairs came crashing down. So she undoes the boards, and then immediately these stairs come down. Little jump scare. Yeah. But to me, I was looking at that as that's the entity on the other side saying, "Hey, welcome, come on up, come on in, and you know, let's open this up so I can get over there," kind of thing, you know. Yeah,
because usually those things are spring loaded and they don't crash down.
No.
Yeah.
And then so she discovers that, and immediately, you know, as she's up there, she's going to kind of explore around, but then the husband calls her down and basically informs her he's got this job now and he's going to have to be leaving, and this will be the first time when Shirin and Lucas are basically left to their own devices, right? They've probably never been without the dad,
exactly,
you know, spending significant time together.
So they're new, and again, Shirin's super uncomfortable with her newfound role, and so it's just her and Lucas.
Well, and then there is a good dialogue exchange between her and Lucas, again, kind of highlighting the loss aspect of this film, as well as the interplay between a child and a new stepmommy, where Lucas is questioning, can the dead come back to life, right? Because he's kind of been doing the hide and seek stuff, the talking back and forth with whatever this entity is. And of course, Shirin immediately thinks he's talking about his mother, and so she's delicately trying to talk about, you know, heaven and things like that. And he's like, no. I mean, can the dead come back to here, our world? And you know, she doesn't. She basically says no.
Right.
But there's definitely some nice interplay there, I thought, and again, just showing that these are real people. I legitimately believe a young boy would ask questions like that.
And that's totally legit.
The stepmom would be trying to delicately talk about, you know, his true mother and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great scene. It shows, you know, the uncomfortableness of Shirin and her newfound role as a mom, and she just doesn't. She's so unsure of herself. You know, she doesn't know what to say or what to do. You know, I think a moment like that, you know, is you spend more time. I mean, that's a great, you know, conversation right there. You know, but the mom says no, you know, to Lucas's question, can the dead come back, like, now? And then that's kind of the end of the conversation. Lucas, you know, he turns his head away towards the wall and he pulls his blankets up, and then the mom leaves, and then that's the end of it. So it's kind of a wasted opportunity right there to have a good conversation, you know. But they're really comfortable around each other. The mom especially, she's like walking on eggshells, and and there's another scene where she somehow forgets to pick Lucas up at daycare, I think.
Right.
You know, and so she's always rushing over there to get him. And, of course, you know, other kids are there because she's late. I think we've all been there. But, of course, Lucas is drawing. And then the daycare, you know, teacher says, well, Lucas, he had a great day today. He was sharing. He was talking about the this a new friend that he has next door.
Right. They always get that new friend.
Yeah, so clearly Lucas is talking about the new friend next door and actually is sharing it in daycare, and then, but the mom knows that there's nobody there. But then Lucas had been drawing a picture of this new friend, and of course the picture of this new friend is, yeah, he doesn't look right.
Right.
Yeah, he looks somewhat creepy. And this movie kind of blows it right there too, is because like whenever you as parents, whenever your kid draws something, you always kind of fawn over it, and especially at daycare. I mean, you're late, and your kid's making a picture right there. But Shirin just picks them up and they just leave. So again, it's just a way that she's just not used to being a mom.
Right.
She's just kind of, yeah, because we parents, they look at drawings. I've always looked at my kids' drawings, like if my kid had been drawing something at daycare, I would totally look at that.
Well, in full disclosure, I actually have some of Jean's kids' artwork hanging on my wall at work.
Yeah, monsters and stuff. Yeah.
But
so another thing is, it's clearly that Lucas has a friend.
Mm-hmm.
It's to him, it's real. And at this point in this movie, Shirin doesn't believe it because, of course, we're supposedly rational adults, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but to Lucas, this entity, he has a friend.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this leads us kind of into the hide and seek sequence, which I think is really great.
Yeah.
Shirin is downstairs. She hears Lucas counting down, ready or not, here I come kind of thing. And she walks up the stairs. Well, she hears a lot of running back and forth. She walks up the stairs. And
which is creepy. And again, the use of sound in this movie.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. But this leads us to a great scene where Shirin thinks she is pursuing Lucas in this hide and seek game that he's playing.
Right.
And so she sees this shot of a young boy scampering into Lucas's bedroom. She goes in there. She's looking for him, and the kid goes under the bed, and then she pulls up the blankets, the covers, to look under that bed. And again, I love how this film really plays with darkness, right?
It does.
Because we, again, as a viewer, we have suspicions that that's not Lucas under that bed.
Right. But she clearly saw a boy go into her room, and then So, and then I think when she went into the room, she saw something go under the bed.
Yeah, saw him go
so
under.
it's Lucas, Yeah.
And so she's peering into there, and then the camera shows that it's really, really dark under there.
Really
You
dark.
can't see, and it holds on it just long enough for you as the viewer to be like, okay, what's going to happen here? And then Shirin starts reaching under there to try to maybe grab him. And then she's kind of digging deeper under this bed, and then who shows up from outside the room walking in?
In the doorway.
It's Lucas.
It's Lucas, so that's not Lucas under the bed.
Right.
And so, and this is where there's knocking on the other side of the wall that Shirin hears. And so Shirin, she knocks on the door, on the wall, knock, knock. And then, of course, there's knocking back, which is really surprising, because then there's clearly something there. And then it gets all quiet. She's all surprised. And then there's a loud bang, bang. From the other side. And so clearly there's something on the other side of that wall.
Right. And again, the use of sound in here, if you've seen Robert Wise's The Haunting, you're familiar with this kind of thing. But I just, again, think it's done brilliantly here, really building the tension. There's nothing really out of the ordinary or out of context with this film. It's really well told. And so then what does Shirin do? Yeah, I'm going to go out the front door and kind of peer through the windows of this other side of the duplex and see if I can see anything.
Right, yeah, she's an inquisitive mom because she's thinking, maybe there's a kid there. And I think she's thinking maybe it's the other girl that had vanished, Kim. Yeah, so she goes over there and checks. She peers in the window.
Yeah, she's looking, and of course, the camera's peering in there, and then Shirin turns away, turns back. Whoop. There was some figure darting across. So what does Shirin do? Much to her credit, calls the cops.
She calls the cops. Good for her. And of course, going back to that theme of like, no, you're not going to believe what the woman says. And you certainly don't believe the kid. Yeah, so the cops look around. They don't even go in the unit. And they're
No.
just like, no, there's nobody there. And yeah, and the husband shows up. And they're all dismissive of her and her concerns. So let's move on.
Yeah, and that's, again, horror movie 101, right? The people that could actually do something to solve it, they aren't going to believe you until it's well after the fact.
Yeah. And the next week's sequence, I love this next sequence, is of course she's getting better at her mom. She's kind of exploring her role as a mother, and I think she's getting better at it. So what does she do? She's trying to investigate this thing, so she puts up a baby cam.
Yep.
Yeah, which I love. And then immediately, and we've seen other movies that explore this idea, but this movie does it really well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she puts up a baby cam, and immediately, yeah, she sees the boy in the baby cam.
Yeah.
But the boy is not Lucas.
Nope.
Yeah, and so she's got to go back into the bedroom and check this out. And then she notices, and in this movie, it's kind of like it gives you like little chills, like that. And so this movie, yeah, it does that. Mm-hmm. And so actually just talking about it now, it made remind me of the movie, of course, in that scene. And so I got little chills just right now. But yeah, she's back in the room, and of course the room is empty where she had seen a boy before. But then she's in the room, and then through the baby cam, because it's hooked up to her iPad, and she's looking at the iPad, she sees a boy in the hallway, right there, but she knows it's not Lucas.
Right.
It's and so she, at this point in the movie, it's pretty confirmed to her that this entity or whatever it is real. Lucas is not crazy. There's something really going on here, and this is a real thing, and it's not her imagination, and because she has seen it. At a certain point, we just need to believe our eyes. Mm-hmm. We need to believe what our eyes are telling us and not be dismissive of what we see with our own senses. Yeah, so there's something going on. Yeah.
Right, and of course, as we go deeper into the film, we even get a large sequence there where the dad, Frederick, is it? I can't remember. Frederick, sorry, it's me again. Is not only continuing to be dismissive of her, he actually starts accusing her of abusing this child.
Right. Yeah. And he even says it to her. He says, "You're the one. Mm-hmm. You're the one scaring this kid." Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so again, I think this relationship is new, and they are not. Of course, they're married, and they're all, "Oh, I love you forever, till death do we part." But they've not had really great talks, and they're not really incredibly close. And so that closeness has not been established. And so instead of aligning yourself with your new wife, you immediately start accusing her. Mm-hmm. It's just because she's saying something that is kind of strange and it's a little weird.
Well, and what leads the father to do that is another really creepy sequence where Lucas is, and I don't remember if he was again playing hide and seek, but the entrance to the attic, the door opens. Oh, he is playing hide and seek. So he's walking down that hallway, and then the door to the attic opens. He walks up there and then looks up at the opening to the attic, and what does he see, right? He sees a not so much boy-looking entity up there.
Right.
And for those of us that are into J-horror, The Ring, movies like that, this particular creature does the tongue noise, which I think you're all familiar with, that little clicking noise.
Yeah, it does this weird clicking noise.
Which is really
super creepy,
unsettling. And of course, this is the first probably truly just straight up monster movies type haunted house scare where you kind of get a picture of what this entity looks like.
Right.
The door closes, and then the next scene is the mom opening the door. And Lucas has gotten some marks on his arms where it appears this entity was trying to drag him up the stairwell and
right.
maybe down into the other building. And so this is the first indication the dad talks about with, is Shirin maybe
Shirin.
hurting my child here?
Right. And it seems like, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but it seems like the entity that lives next door, the evil next door, is can take different forms.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like there are three forms that this entity takes. One is clearly the boy, and then that one is like maybe a masculine, kind of scary kind of,
Mm-hmm.
which is right there. But then there's also like, and we'll get to it, but there's also like a feminine, like adult woman form that this entity takes on.
Well, but
Yeah.
I think that, and I think it has the ability to kind of turn itself into other things based on the knowledge it gains from the individual people it's targeting, is what I really think that third part is, where it can kind of just do that. It's like, oh, I see these photos or these memories you have in your mind, and so I can recreate that memory, kind of thing.
Right. It's good you said that, because I think at the end, the creature turns itself, and it looks like the mother that had died,
Mm-hmm.
because the mother had lost all of her hair. It was like chemotherapy. It looks like she'd been going through cancer treatments, and so the entity appears as a woman with no hair. So I think it took the form of pictures they had seen, or it could look into her mind.
Right. Well, because right before
that,
right before that, there's the scene where he's telling Lucas to sleep, and I think he maybe was also feeding off of memories that Lucas maybe had. Plus, they clearly established with the photo that Shirin looked at with Lucas being held by his clearly dying mother. And then that's the thing. But we are way
we went way ahead. We jumped way ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
But we'll do that on our little show now and again. But but anyway, that's laying the kind of the groundwork of mistrust between the man and Shirin.
Frederick. Yeah.
Wow, I'm gone at work. My kid was fine when I left, and now I come back 3 days later, and he's got these marks all over his arms.
Yeah. There's nobody living next door.
Mm-hmm.
You're the problem.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, woman.
And so you do get a sequence, as we always do in any sort of haunted house movie, where somebody's got to do some investigation. And so Shirin is looking up on her computer, and then that's when she discovers that, oh, yeah, here's the story about this family that moved in here, and the kid went missing.
Yeah, and she turns out that the family had kind of just moved in.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of just like them, that this entity doesn't waste time.
No, it doesn't. Well, and it identified itself to Lucas immediately upon entry into that thing.
Yep.
And then, of course, that is backed up, too, by another sequence where a neighbor fleetingly says, oh, yeah, the new family, they moved in, and then their kid just disappeared right away.
Right.
And so you're getting a little bit of the backstory that this has happened more than once with this entity over there. But as we go along, obviously the tension is continuing to be heightened. I can't comment enough on how much I appreciate these directors and their ability to just continually build tension. There is, once again, not a wasted scene in this film.
Yeah, this movie gets after it.
It's 80, 85, 86 minutes long. Not in the ultimate sweet spot, but close enough to where there's no wasted stuff in this film. And I really appreciate that. A lot of haunted house movies, it's a much slower build. This one, just like Gene said, right away. You're in it, and here it's happening now.
Yeah, it's certainly not an action movie. Please don't get us wrong, but it doesn't need to be, and it at its own pacing, it works great.
Yeah, and so the dad has established, hey, maybe Shirin's not the woman I thought she was, but got to go back to work.
Got to go back to work. Yep.
And so then you get a much more aggressive set piece with Lucas attempting to be abducted by this entity.
Right.
Where Shirin, he's being dragged down the hall and
Yep,
up the
yep.
stairs, and Sharin's basically grabbing Lucas's arms, fighting this entity off, pulls him back down. He's hit his head, so she's got to take him to the emergency room. And then, of course, the dad comes storming in, and
Yeah.
that's when it really
hits,
starts to
yeah.
get hard
Yeah.
between Sharin and the dad.
And the dad realizes that, well, maybe this is a great opportunity for me with my firm, but I'm going to not go to this particular job anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So he takes some time off. So he's staying, at home.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He kind of is like, Sharin, you're going to probably have to pack your bags and leave.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. But he doesn't quite do that. But the entity doesn't go away. And so, yeah.
Well, and then Sharin does attempt to communicate with the former occupants of the other of the house,
And she's successful. Yeah.
yeah, and she does. Clearly the two occupants of that house have more than likely been divorced. It appeared to me because
Right.
she meets him at a car dealership,
Right.
and he's like, "Yeah, I'll have her call you." But when she does communicate with the mom, I have this sense that she's living alone at this point.
Oh, yeah. She's living
know.
alone. And the husband clearly indicated, like he works at a car dealership, salesman, mechanic, or whatever. But he clearly has said that she had lost her mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that she was insane. That again, a woman's not to be believed. So yeah, and so they had separated, and so, but Sharin goes and visits that mom, and the mom talks a little bit about what had happened to her daughter Kim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, and you also get a reveal here where up until this point we have thought that the young boy she saw, or that's kind of haunting them, was Kim.
Right.
They were assuming that Kim was the male gendered version of Kim. And then here's where you see the photo that, oh no, Kim was a little girl.
Kim's a little girl,
And
and so Kim is definitely not the entity or person
Right,
next door.
whatever
Right.
it is, it's not Kim.
It's not Kim, right?
And so this leads then kind of to our climax of the film.
Yeah.
Sharin goes barreling back to the house. The door is locked, and she's pounding on the door. Frederick opens the door. There's I'm not going to say hostile, but a intense little dialogue exchange there. And then what happens? You hear Lucas screaming.
Right. Yeah, because she's pounding on the door to get in, and then Frederick opens the door, but he doesn't let her in.
Mm-hmm.
He's on jerk mode now for sure.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, Lucas screams, and so that they both get in. Yeah, and it gets.
Well, and now Frederick realizes, oh, Sharin is not an insane child abuser.
Well, he
because
realizes somewhat strongly that she was right all along, because the entity takes Lucas through the attic, and so of course, they're running down the long hallway, which we've gone through many times before, because the directors have shown this long hallway many times. But then they go up the stairs into the attic. It's funny because like they're both running side by side, and then Frederick kind of pushes his wife aside. He's like, "I'm going first, woman," and so he goes up. He goes up the stairs, and he goes on all fours. He goes through the attic, but he sees the entity on the other side. But the entity turns around and charges right at him, and I think they go head on. And Frederick gets knocked to the side off the boards, because it's upstairs, and so what does he do? He falls through the drywall
right
into his own apartment. A fall of 10 feet or so. So he's pretty incapacitated now. He's not doing anything.
Yeah, this is the only time you see any blood at all. He's hit his head on the floor down there, and there's blood pooling out of his head.
Yeah, so clearly Sharin realizes that if she's going to do something, or if this kid's going to be saved, she's going to have to do it.
So she enters into the other part of the duplex.
Yeah.
And makes her way through that complex, eventually comes to what I think maybe was the kitchen area, but there's a giant hole there.
There's a giant hole, yeah. And then I think right here at this moment is this is my favorite part of this movie, is I think she hesitates at this hole, but then she makes a decision, and I think she makes the decision in a way that's like, am I going to be hesitant in this role of a mother anymore, or I'm going to go all in. I'm going to be a mother, and that means I am 100% accepting of my new role in this new family. And so she decides to go all in, and she jumps into this dark hole. She doesn't see the bottom. She doesn't know what she's jumping into. She knows Lucas is in there, but she just jumps in there, and I love that. Because she decides, I'm going to go all in, and she just jumps in there.
Well, and that's a good interpretation right there of that, because as the movie plays out, yeah, that was the moment when she decided, nope, I love this kid. I'm his mom.
Yeah.
I'm his mom.
I'm his mom. Yeah. Yeah.
And leads us to, the really creepy underbelly of this house.
Yeah. This house has a crawl space. It's probably a little bit too big. But anyway. But whatever, we're moving along.
It's a horror movie.
You gotta
have creepy stuff happening
creepy
there.
Stuff, yeah.
And this is when you get the first real full-on view of what this entity looks like, and it's like, I'm going to scare you form, I guess.
Yeah, you're where the entity lives. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's twisted, and the usual for those of us that have seen a lot of movies like this. It's I've got a kind of a humanoid form, but it's all twisted around, backwards and all this craziness. So she's freaking out. But anyway, eventually it gets to a point in this crawl space where she is now come upon Lucas, and he is the entity in child form, young person form, is kind of hovering over him, just going, "Oh, sleep, all this stuff." And then the entity is kind of telling Shirin, it's maybe time for you to go to sleep now, too.
Right, exactly.
And so kind of taunting
alluding to her fate.
And so then he goes through some, he changes into the more scary form, and there's this dialogue that Shirin is basically saying, he's mine, but then the entity's like, no, he's mine, and all this kind of stuff. And that's where the entity turns into the child's, Lucas's, true mother.
True mother, right? And the form of this true mother comes right up to Shirin, like inches from her. Yeah, and Shirin kind of, her head is to the side, and she kind of passes out, it seems. And so some time elapses, and then she wakes up, and then. Yeah, but she's still, in the crawl space. But Lucas is still there, and the entity is still there, but she's still alive.
Right,
and the entity could have just whacked her, but didn't.
Well, but I think what it's really doing is it's setting up this kind of battle of wills. The child is mine. No, he's mine, says Shirin, and all this. And so as she gets the courage and the understanding and the commitment, like Gene was saying, that no, this kid is mine. It's my child, my son. I love him.
So she forcefully says that, this is my child. And seemingly, then the entity kind of just backs off.
Well, because it's almost like Shirin's power is greater than the entity's power in attempting to control this child, right? And because the entity was kind of making these jerking back sort of movements, like every time she would say, he's mine, I love him, it was almost like it was wounding the entity a little bit. And that kind of backed him off, and so then she goes over to Lucas, who seems to be dead.
Yeah.
And so there's this sequence there where she is weeping over him, and then what does she do? She starts singing the song that the mother and the father had sung to this child. Right.
But previously she did not sing.
Right.
So she is, by singing this song, she's saying, this is my kid now.
I'm the mother.
I am the mother, and it kind of finalizes the deal. And so then she truly is the mother, and it's the entity kind of realizes that, and that's and the entity backs off.
And that
and she can't escape.
Yep, brings Lucas back, and then Shirin and Lucas walk out of there. And then, of course, the dad stumbles out of the apartment or the duplex. He's still around as well.
Yeah, they're outside in the front.
And the movie, that's the end of the film. And, again, Gene alluded to the low Rotten Tomato scores. I would say you should give this movie a a try. And
Yeah,
I would
give it a
also
try.
say it's a good October Halloween movie for sure, especially for those out there that maybe are not super into horror and don't want something super over the top and just crazy. This is a nice, clean, scary movie. It's
Yeah.
going to probably scare you, but not damage you for life, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was wondering what could have led to a lot low Rotten Tomato scores. Maybe that like Shirin doesn't have to perform some diabolical thing or some ceremony or something to get her kid back. She just has to have a stronger will and than the entity. You know, she just has to tell the entity just to no, this kid's mine, and that's just the way it is. And the entity realizes that, and then it kind of she's victorious. You know, I think sometimes we have to movies set us up. There has to be some big battle scene or swords or knives or yeah. No, I just often don't think that's true. You know, and it brings up another horror movie like idea is that for evil to come into your life, you have to allow it to come in. You have to give it permission to come in. I think this movie touches on the ideas that if somehow negativity is hitting your life or you think it's coming to you, I think sometimes you just can overpower that by just your force of your will. You know, you can just force it out by just by being stronger than that. You know, and I think this movie touches on that.
Yeah, and I just think cinematography is great, sound design is great, the acting is solid. You know, there's nothing about this film that's a negative as far as I'm concerned.
Definitely. It's great. It's
yeah,
great.
so
I really like this movie.
You know, again, if you like horror, absolutely check it out. If you're on the fence with horror, well, one, why are you listening to our podcast? But if you are out there, this is a good one to watch. It's nice and clean and just scary, and you know, you'll be tossing and turning all night because you watched this, but it's not too dangerous. It's not a Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, definitely not. But yeah, it's great. It's a great watch. Again, it's widely accessible. Hulu. Yeah.
Yep, it's out there. Hulu, lots of other streaming platforms. Next week, Gene, I think the plan is
Blair
Witch Project.
Blair Witch.
So,
yeah.
You know, that'll be a fun one to talk about. And
Blair Witch was the early 2000s, kind of like took the movie world by storm.
Yeah,
one
it
of
did.
those found footage movies. But yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay, well,
great. As is this one again.
Yeah, definitely check out Evil Next Door. It's worth your time for sure. Okay, well, we will talk to you next week. Bye.
All right.